Have you ever looked at a map and wondered what's missing? We think we've charted every corner of the globe, but what if I told you there was a massive, powerful empire that has been almost completely erased from our modern maps and even our history books? This isn't some mythical land like Atlantis. This was a real, sprawling empire that connected continents, shaped cultures, and then vanished from our collective memory. Today, we're going on a journey to uncover the lost empire that modern maps forgot. Let's travel back in time, not just a few centuries, but over 1,000 years. Picture a world where Europe is still in its early medieval period, and the great powers we know today are centuries away from forming. In this era, a colossal empire rose, stretching from the frosty steppes of Siberia, across Central Asia, and deep into Eastern Europe. This was the Khazar Khaganate. Ever heard of it? If not, you're not alone. The Khazars were a semi-nomadic Turkic people who, around the 7th century, established a major commercial empire. Think of them as the unsung middlemen of the ancient world. Their territory covered what is now southern Russia, Kazakhstan, eastern Ukraine, Azerbaijan, and parts of the Caucasus. Their capital, Itil, located at the mouth of the Volga River, was one of the great cosmopolitan cities of its time, a bustling hub of trade and culture. So why were they so important? Location, location, location. The Khazars controlled a critical crossroads of trade between the north and south, and the east and west. They sat right on the Silk Road, the famous network of trade routes connecting China and the Far East with Europe and the Middle East. Goods like silk, spices, furs, and precious metals all passed through Khazar lands. Vikings, known as the Rus, sailed down the great rivers to trade with them. Arab merchants traveled north, and Byzantine diplomats came to forge alliances. The Khazars were the gatekeepers, and they grew incredibly wealthy and powerful by taxing this trade. They were the Amazon fulfillment center of the 9th century. But their influence wasn't just economic. The Khazars were a formidable military power. They acted as a crucial buffer state between the expanding Islamic Caliphate to the south and the Byzantine Empire to the west. For over a century, they fought off Arab armies, effectively halting their northward expansion into Eastern Europe. Some historians argue that without the Khazars, the history of Europe could have been vastly different. They were the shield that protected the nascent states of Eastern Europe, allowing them to develop. Now, here's where the story gets really unique. And it's the part that has fascinated and puzzled historians for centuries. In a world dominated by Christianity and Islam, the Khazar elite did something extraordinary. Around the 8th or 9th century, the Khagan, the king, and the nobility converted to Judaism. Think about that for a second. An entire kingdom, led by its rulers, officially adopting Judaism. This was unheard of. We don't have a precise, universally accepted reason for this conversion. Some sources suggest it was a brilliant political move. By choosing Judaism, the Khazars could maintain their independence from the two major religious superpowers of the day, the Christian Byzantines and the Islamic Caliphate. If they had chosen either Christianity or Islam, they would have risked becoming a vassal state. By choosing a neutral, third religion, they asserted their sovereignty and unique identity. This decision turned Khazaria into a haven of religious tolerance, which was incredibly rare for the time. Christian, Muslim, and pagan communities lived alongside the Jewish Khazars, each practicing their own faith freely. The empire's Supreme Court even had judges representing each major religion to ensure fair trials for everyone. It was a multicultural society that was centuries ahead of its time. So, we have a vast, wealthy, militarily strong, and religiously unique empire. Why did it disappear? What happened to the Khazars? The fall of the Khazar Khaganate wasn't a single event but a slow decline, like a fire running out of fuel. The first major blow came from the east. The Pechenegs, another nomadic tribe, were pushed westward, disrupting the Khazars' control over the steppes. But the final, fatal blow came from a former trading partner and tributary, the Kievan Rus, the ancestors of modern Russians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians. Led by a fierce ruler named Sviatoslav I of Kiev in the mid-10th century, the Rus launched a devastating campaign against the Khazars. Sviatoslav's armies sacked the major Khazar cities, including their fortress of Sarkal on the Don River and their great capital, Etil. The heart of the empire was ripped out. The trade routes that had been the source of Khazar wealth were now controlled by the Rus, and the empire fractured. With its economic and military backbone broken, the Khazar state crumbled. The people who once identified as Khazars scattered. Some likely assimilated into neighboring populations like the Pechenegs, the Rus, and other Turkic groups. Their cities fell into ruin, buried by the soil of the steppe, and their story began to fade from history. This brings us back to our original question: why are they forgotten on modern maps? There are a few reasons. First, the Khazars didn't leave behind a strong legacy of monumental architecture like the Romans or Egyptians. As a semi-nomadic people, their cities were built largely of wood, brick, and felt yurts, materials that don't stand the test of time. Their capital, Etil, has never been definitively located. It's thought to be submerged under the rising waters of the Caspian Sea. Without a Pompeii to excavate, their physical footprint is faint. Second, their written records are scarce. We know about them mostly through the writings of others: Arabs, Byzantines, Persians, and Rus chroniclers. It's like trying to piece together someone's life story using only their neighbors' diaries. These accounts are often biased and incomplete. The Khazars themselves likely wrote in a Turkic runic script, but very few examples have survived. Finally, history is often written by the victors. The powers that rose after the Khazars, like the Kievan Rus and later the Golden Horde, had their own stories to tell, and the Khazars became a footnote, a forgotten chapter in the grand narrative of Eastern European history. Nationalism in the 19th and 20th centuries further complicated things, as modern nations built their identities around their own direct ancestors, often overlooking the complex, multicultural world of empires like Khazaria. The story of the Khazars is a powerful reminder that our understanding of history is constantly evolving. It shows us that maps don't just show geography, they reflect power, memory, and the stories we choose to tell. The Khazar Khaganate was a ghost on the map for centuries, a lost empire whose influence shaped the world we live in today in ways we are only just beginning to understand. Its legacy isn't written in stone, but in the complex genetic and cultural makeup of the peoples of Eastern Europe and Central Asia, and in the tantalizing mystery of a kingdom that dared to be different. So next time you look at a map of Eastern Europe and the Caucasus, take a moment to imagine what's not there. Picture a bustling, multicultural empire, a vital artery of the medieval world, ruled by Jewish kings, that stood as a bridge between worlds before it vanished into the mists of time. Thanks for joining me on this historical detective journey. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into the forgotten corners of our past. Let me know in the comments what other lost civilizations you'd like to explore. See you next time.